Okay. Get my other glasses, sorry. I need my class selection. Okay, let's get started. It's time to call to order the regular meeting of Wednesday, March 29th of the Planning and Transportation Commission. So the first thing we need is roll call, please.
Chair Suma,
Here.
Vice Chair Chang,
Here.
Commissioner Heckman,
Here.
Commissioner Rekdal,
Here.
Commissioner Rupavar is absent. Commissioner Templeton,
Here.
we have a quorum.
Thank you for that. And would you like, Ms. Dow, would you like to read the instructions on how to participate over Zoom?
Sure.
Thank you.
Members of the public may provide live public comment by submitting a speaker card prior to the start of the public comment on that item. Spoken comments via computer or smartphone will be accepted through the Zoom app. To address the commission, go to zoom.us/join. Meeting ID is 916-4155-9499. When you wish to speak, click on raise hand. To offer comments using a regular phone, call 1-669-900-6833 and enter the meeting ID. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, hit *9 on your phone so we know you wish to speak.
Thank you for that. And I'm not sure if we have any members of the public that would like to speak.
No, have not received any speaker cards or raised hands on Zoom.
Okay, thank you for that. And I don't see anyone in the room that would like to speak. So we will go to agenda changes, additions, and deletions. I see that there are none. So we will then move on to the city official reports, please.
Great. Thank you, Chair Suma, and good evening, Planning and Transportation Commissioners. Jonathan Late, Director for Planning and Development Services. Just a few items to report from planning, and then Sylvia's got a couple announcements for the Office of Transportation. Just wanted to share with the Commission that last Monday, the City Council had a discussion on the Parklet program standards. We received some good feedback on some additional changes that we need to make for that program, and we're currently working on addressing those, and we'll return to the council as soon as we are able. On May 1st, the City Council will be taking up uh, 2147 Yale Street project that I believe the Commission had looked at and made a recommendation to deny the applicant's request for a parcel map exception. On May 8th, I believe we have on your, we have reached out to you to reserve that date for a possible joint session with the City Council, where you would be receiving the housing element that will be revised based on some feedback that we've recently received from HCD. And we would anticipate that being a joint session. The Planning and Transportation Commission would first consider that document and make a recommendation to the City Council that evening. And then the City Council will continue to deliberate and decide what they want to do with the revised housing element. Let's see. In other news, there is a community meeting on March 30th from 5:30 to 6:30, where the city is going to share some information and receive feedback on a proposed rental registry program that we are currently working on. That is online, and information is available on the City of Palo Alto website at a number of places, but also the calendar. If you look to that, you can get some information. let's see, the Buena Vista Mobile Home Park, we anticipate, or there's going to be some town halls with residents. And as they continue to refine their concepts and create a redevelopment plan for that area. Information, again, is also available on the city's website for that. And then lastly is just a note that in the next coming months that we would expect Palo Alto Home Key, this is the transitional housing project, we would expect some revised plans being presented to the city council and some further direction provided to hopefully advance that project as soon as we can. So that'll conclude the planning related remarks, and I'll turn it over to Sylvia Starlack.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm Sylvia Starlack, Transportation Planning Manager for the city in the Office of Transportation. I have two updates for you. First is that May is Bike Month, and Bike to Work Day is just around the corner on Thursday, May 18th. The fun continues with Bike to Wherever Days on Friday and Saturday, May 19th and 20th, with more fun events and Energizer stations for riders in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties. Our local volunteers are running 3 Energizer stations the morning of May 18th, one at City Hall Plaza, one at the California Avenue Caltrain Plaza, and one at the Wilkie Way Bridge on Miller Avenue. More information can be found at the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition's Bike to Wherever Days website and at the forthcoming city's Bike to Work Day website. Second item is an update about our recently launched Palo Alto Link on-demand transit service. It's our on-demand corner-to-corner ride-sharing service. Since it launched on March 7th, we've provided 2,473 rides to folks. This is as of yesterday. And here's a rundown of other metrics up through yesterday that you might be interested in. 3,627 accounts were created in the app for the Palo Alto Link. We have had 728 unique active riders. We've, let's see, the average ride duration is 13.7 minutes. The average ride distance is 3.3 miles. The average ride rating out of 5 is pickup walking distance, because it is a corner-to-corner service. Is 120 meters, and I did the math, it's 131 yards or less than 400 feet. And the average pickup estimated time of arrival is 14.4 minutes. So that's all I have.
Thank you for that. Do any of my colleagues have questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you. I was really excited about this program. I'm glad to hear it's doing really well. I had a feature that wasn't working as expected that I wanted to share with you. I downloaded it on a Friday, I think, after work or after the hours of the program. And it reminded me all weekend, why haven't you taken a ride yet? And I'm like, because the hours aren't there. So I would say maybe sync your notifications with the hours window. But I did see my first Palo Alto Link ride in the wild today over by Gunn High School. So here I hear that it's going well. So great. Congratulations.
Anyone else?
Director Late, the home key project revisions that you're expecting to come in, do you know if that project is going to be shrinking or getting larger, or the changes really aren't related to capacity?
Yeah, I believe the capacity is still about the same. I think there's some other changes that are being considered to that address the community room space and some other areas that and there might be a slight site plan configurations, but it's, for the most part, it's what you would expect.
Um,
Oh.
Director Late, I noticed that the packet doesn't have the 5/8 date in here for the PTC meeting. Do we want to include that in the?
I'm sorry, I missed
In the future dates?
It doesn't have future dates?
Packet page 5. I don't know if that's something just to, just to keep some visibility up because,
Oh, it looks like it may have been cut off from the production. Veronica, could we take a look at that and redistribute to the commission?
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then the other question I had for Ms. Starlack was, have we planned a study session yet for transportation and talk to us about El Camino and what's happening to it? We've been asking 3 or 4 meetings in a row to see if we can coordinate that with transportation.
So we have not planned one. I can talk tonight at some point if you would like just about what's happening on El Camino.
Yeah, that'd be
Um,
great. But I don't know
yeah.
if we want to agendize it so people can hear it. so-
Yeah, I
yeah.
don't know what the right protocol is, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I think your next item is talking about the work plan. And so to the extent that there's some interest in the commission to know more about.
I like it. Let's do that. All right, thank you.
thanks.
Follow up on the home key project. Do we have any estimate of when it's going to start and when construction start and when it would finish?
I think they're fine tuning some of that. So I wouldn't want to speak now and get that something completely wrong, but I believe that's part of the update that will be forthcoming.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Chang?
Question for Mr. Late. We got a public comment from a bunch of Ellsworth Place residents, and just because we were copied on it, I was just wondering if you knew anything about what was going on, because it was regarding supposed alleged code violations and code enforcement.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And I wasn't able to get a response out to the emailer today, but I will endeavor to make sure that happens tomorrow. We had actually, we've been talking about that. The one complaint that I was aware of was the chain link fence. And so we'll follow up with code enforcement action and have that addressed. And then there was another comment about a pile of dirt and some wood stakes that had been collected. So we're going to take a look at that. And if that's out there, then we will seek to have that remedied as well.
There was also a question about a tree.
Yeah, I think the tree is a prior comment, unless I'm mistaken. I think that was something, a concern about a tree that was cut down last year or sometime before. And I believe the staff analysis on that, the conclusion was that the tree itself was not a protected tree at the time that it was cut down, because it was for the last, under the last set of regulations that apply to protected trees.
Thank you. Super helpful.
I was going to ask Director Late if we didn't have any tentative future agenda items in our packet, or at least I didn't. And so I'm assuming, do you have that? Do you know, or maybe you don't?
Let's see. I think we can speak to, if you give me a moment, I can.
Not a big deal. I just thought if you knew,
Yeah,
or if maybe my packet was missing it, but others.
Yeah, I know that that's something that we typically provide. Let me just take a look here. Okay. Okay, well, let's see. From what I see at your, there's a continued discussion on the work plan that we're starting tonight. That's the only thing I see formally established. And for the meeting after that, there is on April 26th, we want to present some zoning code text amendments related to the parklets standards. So we'll be submitting that for the commission's review. It looks like there's a study session on the NB cap scheduled. There's been some refinements on that plan. And tentatively a discussion on AB 2097. That's a recent state law, which I think we'll talk about as part of our discussion item tonight as well. And then, Mr. Arlak, it looks like there's also a study session to review quiet zones as a conceptual plan for Palo Alto Avenue.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's nothing else, we'll go on to our first item, which is a study session, which is for us to review our 2022-2033 work plan and discuss drafting the 2023-2024 work plan. And what I thought we would do is, does staff have a presentation? I didn't.
No, we don't.
No. So what I thought, if this is okay, sounds good to everybody, we could do is just go through them one by one, and Director Late could tell us if there's anything new or if it's been completed or is no longer maybe consistent with council priorities. And if that's okay, and then we can take comments from my colleagues.
Yeah, if we could, I had an overall comment that maybe would be better before we go through the 18 items.
Okay, please.
Because honestly, when I read this work plan, which we approved last year, I didn't remember it. I didn't remember all of this detail. And I didn't remember that it had 18 items. I remember our discussion a year ago when we were talking about our priorities, right? You know, what we approved last year, but I didn't. So I assume this is it. But one thing I did just to see sort of how we did is I went through all of our agendas for the last year since we approved this work plan to see which of these 18 items we actually tackled. And my effort was not very scientific, just looking at the title of each item and trying to figure out whether it fit any of these. But from my analysis, we hit item number 9, which is the housing element update. That was a big one. We saw that 4 times, and we saw ADU ordinance updates 5 times. Among the other 16, I found we hit 5 of those 1 time, and 11 of them we never talked about. Now, again, that might not be exactly right, but it's probably pretty close. And so I mean, personally, I don't want to have a work plan with 11 things that we didn't touch. And so as we go through this exercise tonight, what I'm thinking is let's try to be realistic and let's figure out what is legitimately maybe coming to us in the next year that we can have some effect on or that we'll be discussing so that we don't have 11 items next year that we didn't even touch, because that just looks like we didn't get to stuff. And of course, that's not the case because, you know, these are things that all come to us. So anyway, so I wanted to provide that kind of color in advance so that we can be thinking about that as we go through the individual items.
Thank you for that. I did something kind of different, but there was a link to the council's, something staff prepared for council priorities, where in our staff report, in our agenda, I mean, and it found all the programs that relate to the priorities of council. And I kind of made a list because I always think we should maybe put those first because council has prioritized them. So I kind of looked at it with that kind of cap on, is how many of these, how many things that we have here align with council priorities. So just kind of a different approach. So thank you for that. And anyone else? Or, oh, go ahead, Commissioner Templeton.
Sure. Thank you. I think both of these approaches are really good. I was joking with Director Late earlier that we have had the same things multiple times, and we're not really having the diversity of discussion that we had hoped to have last year. I think the problem with having 18 priorities is that's not priorities, like it's not prioritized, right? So, and there's things that we had at the top that are, you know, safety and transportation safety stuff that we haven't really gotten to. And so I just want to echo some sentiments that we have been discussing over the past year about how much we love the transportation team and want to work with you to help discuss these issues that are really important life and death matters to our community, about how to get around the community safely. So I know you're passionate about that as well. And so we're trying to figure out how to engage the community in discussions in addition to housing, right? So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then why don't we just go through them? These were not prioritized. They were just in a random order. So, but why don't we go through them, starting with the first one, which, and see if our Director Late has comments or updates on, we can just go through them one by one.
Yeah, so Ms. Starlack will guide us through that first item.
Thank you, Director Late.
We're also known as Sylvia.
I never call him that. So for traffic safety, we did we gave a road safety report on October 26th, 2022. We don't do annual, we don't normally do an annual report. So when we have a report, we bring it. We did just receive a federal grant to upgrade that recent report to meet federal grant funding standards, and that will likely come to you before it's final once we have a draft of that safety report. So that will be coming. I'm not sure when it will be coming, but it will be coming. But we have a grant to do the work, so yay. That's my update on that. If you, I can say some additional things about traffic road safety since we're here and there's interest. Just so the commissioners understand and the public understands that we conduct neighborhood traffic safety improvement projects on an ongoing basis. We don't bring them here necessarily, but we are doing this work all the time based on the 311s we receive, based on traffic calming requests we receive, based on locations where there have been collisions. For example, Middlefield Road and Lincoln, that location, we're finalizing a report with recommendations for improvements to that intersection. And when that is done, we'll conduct a community meeting probably around the end of April, and we may follow up with an additional workshop if needed. So that's the plan for that. And then I know that Commissioner Templeton is interested in El Camino Real, and I wanted to update you regarding the El Camino Real paving project that is that Caltrans is planning for some time at the end of this calendar year. I think there's been a little bit of confusion, and frankly, there was confusion on staff's part, I think originally too, that this was an opportunity to redesign El Camino. Caltrans does not view this repaving project as an opportunity to redesign the road. They see it as a maintenance project. We consulted our City School Transportation Safety Committee and our Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee for comments on the project, and we've submitted those comments to Caltrans, and they've actually been very diligently working to include those committees' comments and staff's comments as well into their plans. These comments focus on bringing the signage, striping, pavement stencils, and signals up to newer standards. Things like bike signal stencils in left turn lanes, high visibility crosswalks across El Camino Real, bicycle lane line extensions. I think we asked for advanced stop bars so that the crosswalk was not the first line for drivers to focus on for where to stop. And bicycle lane line extensions across El Camino where bike lanes exist on both sides of the cross streets. You may have heard about other cities who have jumped onto the repaving project with their own money, their own environmentally cleared projects, and they're giving those designs and money to Caltrans to get those projects built with the repaving project. So they're paying Caltrans, they're saying, we know you're coming through, do this for us. Those communities have already had a community conversation about what El Camino should look like in the future, and we have not had that conversation. However, we are about to kick off our update to our bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan. The vision for El Camino Real, particularly with regard to vulnerable road users. So we are, that project will happen, and we can have a conversation here about what we want to have happen, and then we can pursue that. So that's kind of how this is going from my perspective.
Okay, thank you for that. Commissioner Chang?
So to clarify, the fact that we haven't had our community discussion doesn't prevent us from then implementing any of those things, even if we miss the timing with respect to the repaving project, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then I had a question. You had mentioned that we received grant funds to do the traffic safety, and you said you didn't know when it would come, but is this something that would come within the next year, or is it longer time frame?
I'm not exactly sure. I hope it would come in the next year because I want to get the plan done before the next grant funding cycle. So I want to accelerate it, but I'm trying to figure out how to get resources going on this plan.
Okay, I asked just because if it is something that will happen this year, we can leave it, we can put that on our work plan then, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other comments? Oh, okay.
Oh, maybe we should move that so she can see my light. Thank you. Thank you for those updates. It's very helpful to hear the progress. When we don't hear, we assume nothing's being done. So it's really helpful. My concern and the purpose for bringing up other cities that are nearby and how they are taking quick action to prevent future deaths at dangerous intersections is because that's exactly what's happening. They've had a fatal incident with a child, and they're addressing it. This incident happened a year after our city's incident with a child, and I don't see any improvements. And it's frustrating to me because, as you know, I've witnessed collisions. I've heard about these other collisions, and I know you know this, but I'm saying it for the record. We encourage our children to bike to school, and many children have to cross El Camino to get to school, to get to Barron Park, to get to Gunn, to get to Fletcher. Some kids are going the other direction across Alma to get to Fair Meadow and JLS. So these are real concerns, and it's important for us to advocate for the work that you're doing and to prioritize it, and not only get it funded, but get it moving as soon as possible, because we don't want any more children to die getting to school or crossing the road because they're using a bike. We want them to be safe and comfortable on their bikes. So it's really important to hear that you are working on this and that we can retrofit El Camino to be safer. My concerns, and one thing about bringing it up, is they are going to bring some of their intersections into line. As you mentioned, they're taking some of our feedback. And if there's anything that we can do on some of these intersections, let us know how we can help you push that through, right? This is the point of us asking for you for transportation to come and engage with us, is to help get these things done and help shine a light on the work that you're doing. So if there is a possibility of you coming here for a study session and talking about and getting a community conversation here, yes, you need them in the neighborhoods too, but it would be a really good opportunity for you to showcase the work you're doing and inform us, because the transportation situation factors into a lot of what we do. So thank you for the update.
Commissioner Rekdal?
Yeah, not to be ignorant, but the other cities, what are they doing? They had this community conversation, decided to make some changes. What kind of changes do they make?
Mountain View bike lanes on El Camino. They're
On El Camino? Or
on El
crossing
Camino. They will be removing on-street parking to put in protected bike lanes. There's a small part in Los Altos. They will also be removing parking in order to put in protected or buffered bike lanes on El Camino in Los Altos. And then Menlo Park, I believe, I need to, I wasn't able to get the update today, but I believe Menlo Park is also moving towards putting protected bike lanes on El Camino in Menlo Park.
And if we want to do something similar, could we just do it ourselves, or do we have to get approval from Caltrans?
We would have to get approval from Caltrans, but these other cities got approval from Caltrans.
Yeah. Okay. And
There's more, right? They're retrofitting the intersection, or they're improving the safety of the intersection where the little boy died as part of this project.
In Mountain View?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm not,
Well, that's what they said.
okay.
I don't know if it's in the current plan, but they did say this after he died.
I mean, some places on El Camino, the median is quite narrow. And so if someone's halfway through, especially if an older person's crossing and they can't make it, there's no refuge. And I would think that increasing the width of that would be pretty easy to do. You might lose a foot on each side, but there'd be a big safety benefit. Is that something that we can request?
Yeah, we can request those things. Generally, we have to get a grant, or, it wouldn't be something that we can just go ahead and do. It's a whole process.
But during this repaving, they're not changing the medians. They're just purely repaving.
They might be making some changes, not very major changes, however. I don't think they're adding in pedestrian refuge islands as part of the repaving. They might be making small changes.
Okay.
But, yeah.
And for Charleston or Rostadero at El Camino, they're still under work there. Are they going to improve the bike situation at that spot? Because that was always very hard, because you have a bike lane and all of a sudden it disappears and it becomes a right turn lane, and that's really dangerous.
Yeah, that's our project. That's not the Caltrans project.
Yeah.
Yes, and getting that bike lane all the way through there was really important to me. So yes, that will be
Okay.
coming.
I look forward to that. Thanks.
Commissioner Templeton, do you have something else?
Yes, I do. Why did Caltrans change the date from spring of 2023 to end of year? We're in desperate need of repaving El Camino. It is dangerous.
I don't know. I don't know what happened there. I think, design can sometimes run into issues. So I'm not exactly sure why it was delayed.
Oh, Commissioner Templeton, I'm sorry. I was just wondering if your light was working. It's not showing up here. Oh, that's fine. I can do that too. Yeah, okay, thanks.
So Commissioner Templeton, when you say it's dangerous because of potholes, or are there other issues?
Yeah, the potholes, the lane width, I've just mentioned this before, but over by my neighborhood and Barron Park, at El Camino Way, crossing El Camino Real. It's 9 lanes wide. You've got 2 parking lanes. You've got 3 lanes in either direction and a turn lane, and it's a pathway to get to Gun. So a lot of those kids are, rushing to get to school and having a hard time deciding if they have enough time to get across El Camino. I witnessed a collision there of 2 girls on their way to school. It's a lot. And my son goes to school across that street as well, and I don't feel like it's safe for him. But it's heavily used. And if you add the potholes in, the rough paving, disintegrating pavement into that equation, it gets even worse. It's harder to navigate that. You're more likely to fall off. People can't always see because the angle of the sun in the morning when kids are on their way to school, they can't always see well in the intersection if someone's lying on the ground. It's really dangerous.
Any other discussion on goal 1? Commissioner Heckman, please.
Yeah, so to kind of finish this off and maybe sort of set the template for how we need to go about this, because tonight what we're trying to do is it's not so much a review of what we did last year as develop our work plan for this coming year, right? And so right now, project number, goal number 1, study session to discuss traffic safety. We did that October 26th. So the question is, do we want a project goal for this coming year that relates to traffic safety? Now, given some of the discussion we've heard from the commission tonight, it's pretty clear that it's super important to us. And so we would like to have some traffic safety work that we can do this year. That would be, it seems like a goal of ours. But I think we should be ending each of these discussions as we go through these goals with, should it stay on the plan for the coming year? Some of these, I think we're going to find that they're not likely to come to us in the next year. And so I'm wondering if we can put those in possible goals for future years so we don't lose them, but just take them off our active list if we're not really expecting. So, but for this particular one, I think we're interested if that report is finished, if what Ms. Starlack was talking about with the grant and the report, if that's done, we'd like to make some progress on that in our coming year. And so maybe we should have staff write up this traffic safety project goal tied to that and just reflect that there's some uncertainty about whether the report will be prepared in this next cycle for us. But if it is, we want to work on it.
Yeah, that sounds right. Commissioner Templeton, did you have something?
I did. I just want to say that maybe we should be more specific in how we write this, because I was not satisfied with that report as far as improving traffic safety in the city. I know they did deliver a report, but it had a lot of gaps in it as far as the things that we were mentioning tonight. So I don't know how we phrase that more accurately, and maybe that's something we can leave to the chair and vice chair. But I think if you feel like that item has been checked off, then maybe we need to rephrase it.
Well, I think we need to broaden it to reflect general concerns about traffic safety and address them in the city. And I think Ms. Starlack has sort of a plan for what she's going to do with that this year, and we would like to be a part of that. I think that's the way kind of to phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, go ahead. Oh, okay. So with that, I think we can move on. I think that's enough. Is that enough information for staff at this point? I
Yes,
think we
thank you.
can move on to goal number 2, which I'll just preface by saying that this aligns with council priorities, and I would think we would want to keep it. So does staff have an update on, Director Late have an update?
So this is one that I actually think is somewhat tied to goal number 7. And I would recommend merging those if we're going to keep this on. The city council has asked, and the commission has participated in discussions concerning retail. And more recently, you've had the conversation about the CUP thresholds. And so, the commission forwarded a recommendation. You wanted to continue that. Staff wanted to get it done. And, council said, no, we're going to, send it back to the commission to review. The reason staff wanted to. And what we're basically doing now is just folding everything in to one effort. There's a couple of things that the council's asked us to do. One is the retail preservation. They wanted us to look at that and just examine is the policy intent of that program achieving its goal? Is there other, things that we're not realizing as a result of that policy? That's one. CUP thresholds is the other one that you've talked about. In general, there is a third one is just sort of this general sense of wanting to understand what's the proper definition of retail anymore with sort of the evolving nature of retail. A fourth item is this idea of, on a citywide basis, let's take a look at retail and understand, understand the landscape, the conditions, and we're getting part of that story from Streetscape, which is another consultant that's also working on retail related information. And then the council asked us to understand not just citywide, but on a district level, do we need to make changes to our permitted uses? And do we need to look at parking? And do we need to look at some of these things that would provide an opportunity to encourage retail? And so we've engaged Michael Baker International to help us prepare a report. They submitted a draft report. It's something that we were going to send to the commission, but we decided that it's not quite ready and it needs a fair amount more information. And so we are currently looking at a revised scope to have them engage in some additional work, including looking at the streetscape study that was done and continues to be worked on. And I understand in the next month or two, that effort, I think, is coming close to an end. So we'll incorporate that information. We've asked MBI to they've done some interviews with property owners. We wanted them to also reach out to some more local business owners on California Avenue, Middlefield, just on El Camino, as well as downtown University. So we can get a little more rounded, perspective on that issue. And also to compare us to, another jurisdiction. Just to make sure that we're not in this bubble and have that sort of perspective. And along the way, we want to know what's the sort of best management practices to the extent that they exist for retail regulation. And there's, again, this will come up a few times tonight, AB 2097 has implications to our local environment. If you don't know what that's about, that's a state bill that says if you're a housing or commercial project within a half mile of, in our instance, Caltrain station, you do not have to provide any parking for that development. There's some exceptions, like hotels need to provide parking, and I think there's one other one. But that's a big deal, and so we'll talk about that probably throughout the night. And how does that work for our retailers, and is that a good thing for them, right? If presumably, do they, just because you can doesn't mean do you want to. you want people to be able to park and go to your place. So anyways, that's a whole lot to say. This is a big issue, and we're definitely going to be coming to the Planning and Transportation Commission to help us along the way, and we really are going to need your guidance to help titrate this approach that we're moving, so that when we go to the City Council, we've got a commission endorsed and a thoughtful analysis that we can present with some standards. So I'm excited about that one, but I still feel like we're in the beginning stages of it.
Right. And to the extent I think we can consolidate kind of in a general sense, all of our retail things and leave that as a goal because these goals are not programs. They're
Right.
broad. They can be broader than that. Commissioner Chang? Did you? Oh, I thought you had your light on. Sorry. Do I have other comments? Commissioner Heckman?
Yeah, thank you. So on this one, we did have on our August 31st agenda, retail recovery and CUP thresholds. So traveling together, at least at that point. And this is the issue that went to the council a couple of months ago on the making permanent the temporary ordinance, right? And what the director said at that time, and he explained a little bit about it this time, is that if the ordinance stays temporary, which ultimately it did, it's going to be in that condition realistically for 18 months was the timeline that we talked about there, because that's how long this more comprehensive approach is going to take. And so recognizing that was 2 months ago, recognizing that that's past this next cycle. So when staff modifies this project goal number 2 and merges it with 7, I would like them to reflect that the expectation is not to get to the end in this coming cycle, but rather to basically move the ball forward toward the end, which is expected in the next cycle. And that'll dovetail with staff's anticipated timing. So we're not setting expectations too high.
Yeah, maybe just a clarification for myself, because these work plans are somewhat new. Is it a fiscal year work plan or a calendar year? Because I see this as a fiscal year.
Well, I think we adopt this in late April. So and starting, now,
Okay.
right? This isn't already 4 months past.
Right.
No, it was new. So, but I kind of thought it happened. I thought it was supposed to be in around April because the council aligned all the appointments for all boards and commissions
Right.
start April 1st.
Okay.
And this kind of happened, but maybe that needs to be clarified.
Okay.
Now that
Yeah.
you bring it up.
All right.
Yeah, my impression is that it's a July to June sort of year. And if that's the case, you actually will be close to closure, if not.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But your point is well taken. And
So,
we'll get that.
but maybe we can actually make that clear in the prefaces of the work plan, because right now it's called the 22-23, but.
Yeah.
Right. And so actually that's a good point. Right. But I do think that we delay, particularly now, we delay our consideration of it until the end of April, because under the new appointment timing, we're getting new commissioners at the beginning of April.
Right. This meeting was to sort of tee things up and
Right.
tighten our last year's
Yeah.
to let them
Okay. So that's
participate.
so that's a good point. So yeah, if we are thinking of a July 1 to June 30th period, then maybe that is pretty close to 18 months from a couple months ago. So maybe we'll get to the end. Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Chang?
My understanding is that we're supposed to have in somewhere, right, either our boards and commissions handbook or something. It's by the end of Q2 that we're supposed to have this to council. So that would fit with the fiscal year.
Thank you for remembering that. Other comments on this? No? Okay, then let's go on to goal 3, which is, I think one we won't want to keep in as it seems relevant to council priorities and also some of our own concerns. So, Director Late, did you have comments on goal 3?
Sure. Let's see. Yeah, so this is, we're calling them neighborhood plans here. Area plans, and I don't know if that was intentionally left off of this particular work plan item or not. And we've heard a lot about neighborhood plans and how other jurisdictions are using them to help plan for and build housing as well as any other types of land uses. And we even had the grand jury report make that recommendation that the city should invoke more specific plans or area plans to help sort of focus that effort. And as the commission is aware firsthand, these plans take time and they are costly. And we're still working our way through the NVCAP process. That's just one plan of 80 acres or something that we're working with. So the council did recently give us direction to come up with a schedule for coordinated area plans on El Camino Real, San Antonio, California Avenue, and downtown. And so that's our goal for 2023 is to come up with a schedule for options on how we might begin to roll that out.
What were those 3 places again?
It was 4 places, downtown University, downtown Cal Ave, and El Camino Real. And I think the one that I think we all agree needs to be maybe prioritized is San Antonio, particularly with the amount of housing that's being contemplated in that area.
Yeah, and that's a mighty big list, really.
Yeah,
It's like
I
a decade
figure.
of work.
Yeah, that's
But
a decade
I-
is being kind. I was thinking 20 years and about 22 million, but
But to the extent that we're going to have a new neighborhood, in San Antonio near 101, I think that's the place where we really need, personally, I think we need to keep that in mind. And I didn't read this necessarily, but of course, council has given you direction that we have to have area plans for all these areas, but that we needed to keep in mind with the changes and the growth in the city in response to the state mandates, that we have to make sure we're accommodating, the residents of these future places, and that they have bike lanes and parks and things like that. So
yeah, I agree. And I do think we might want to be open-minded to different approaches to developing these coordinated area plans. I just think we need to be, we need to process these things more quickly
yeah,
so that they're relevant. And it's not going to do us any good if it takes us 8 years to, develop a plan. And so we'll need to really think through our engagement strategy and how do we handle differences of perspectives on what needs to be accomplished in a way that keeps the ball moving, but gets all the voices heard and, help us develop this. And so anyways, those are just some things that would be really helpful to check in with the commission to see how we can do this. Because I think, NVCAP, that's another thing that we should probably do at the end. We hope to be done with that project at the end of this year. We should do a sort of a check-in to see what worked and what didn't work about that particular program so that we don't repeat the parts that didn't work.
yeah. And I think we have to fold these kinds of thoughtfulness into when we get individual and smaller projects that come to us. We have to think about how is this going to work and how can we get these other things that are not amenities, they're necessities for neighborhoods. So I kind of see it as part of all of our planning that we're going to do is to accommodate for this. So I have some ideas about that, but I'll go to my colleagues, and I think Commissioner Chang was first.
So my first, it's a question. So with respect to San Antonio, does Antonio, because if it's limited to San Antonio, it doesn't really solve fully what the issue is, I think.
Correct. I agree. I'm using in my mind, and that's dangerous to just have it in my mind. When I say San Antonio, I'm thinking of the areas where we're proposing housing.
Yeah.
So that is inclusive of all of San Antonio, from the San Antonio Caltrain station down to, sort of the Googleplex and all the places in Palo Alto in between is sort of, when I think about that plan.
Yeah. Okay. And for context, this was written in this way, I believe, because I had brought up precisely the issue of these, this housing, the vast change that's going to come. And if we need parks, need schools, need bike paths, if we don't get out in front of it, then the developments are going to come piecemeal over the next 8 years. There will probably be a few that come. So if we don't know where we want a park or a school or a bike path, then it makes it really hard to, we just have to approve it, right? If there's no plan in place. So yeah, I think that we specifically didn't say area plan, knowing that the current process for an area plan is long, costly, and potentially pieces of it not very effective. So that's why it's phrased the way it is. Like, how do we do this?
Yeah. As I think about it further, before I go back to the city council with the recommendation, I'd like to actually come back to the commission and we can maybe have a meeting or two to sort of talk through that so that a proposal can be submitted to the council that says, here's what we think needs to be included in a plan like this, and in this plan here. And maybe take a look at the code that sets forth the process for the coordinated area plan and see how we can, apply that in a way that will be useful.
Commissioner Rekdal and then Commissioner Heckman.
Yeah, I was on NVCAP and my first reaction was we want something more nimble than NVCAP. And I think one of the biggest problems with NVCAP is the success of SOFA. And that since SOFA was so successful, we were kind of patterned after that, but it was a totally different problem. That was really one landowner. And so you could actually do the design.
Yeah.
And for NVCAP, you had all these landowners. You really we should have concentrated more on zoning and say, how would we change the zoning to get what we want? Because we didn't have control over the properties. So I would think we have to, and that's in some ways a simpler problem. Like we spent a lot of time looking at what style of housing we liked and didn't like. And that's kind of relevant when you're maybe ARB, if the ARB would have review of this, but for most of NVCAP, it would have been better off saying, what do we envision and what won't be done if we leave the zoning as is? I think that'd be a crisper way of doing that. But I agreed. Down in San Antonio, we need a lot of work. There's parks and bike lanes. And if they start building, there won't be room for parks and bike lanes. So we have to get out in front. So.
Commissioner Heckman.
So this is the kind of generic neighborhood planning goal, right? NVCAP is its own thing. That's goal 8. So in here, our goal was to have a study session regarding neighborhood planning, and we haven't done it so far. And I guess there's a question: are we going to do it between now and the end of June? If not, then we didn't meet this goal this year. And so then my question is, are we going to do it next year? And what's that, right? Because if it's going to be here in some form, we need to have a strategy to actually work on it. And so that can take 2 forms. The more likely and more typical form is staff brings us the item. And Director Late was just talking about that as they are, formulating how this is going to work. Maybe they'll bring us something before it would go to council. And that's kind of, and my impression of what the director was saying was this is kind of more of the macro, at the macro stage, really just getting our arms around it, right? And that'll be great. And if that's what we're going to do, then let's have this reflected. The other way is we initiate, right? We have to find time on our own agenda, and we've done this a couple of times, but we do it rarely, and say, and in fact, I think this is what happened with the traffic safety study session last October. We said, we want this, right? Staff, you may not be processing something that would require you to bring it to us. We want this. And so again, it can work either way, but but if it's going to appear on our list, we need to commit that it's going to happen one way or another. And if we don't think it's going to happen in the next fiscal year, possibly because, first, really where this really ties to is the next RENA cycle, right? Because we're, later this year, we're going to get our housing element certified. And then we're going to engage in a significant rezoning, upzoning of a lot of Palo Alto property that right now isn't planned for that kind of residential density. And there are going to be new neighborhoods, on paper at least, and a lot of new neighborhoods on paper. And I think we're going to have to, and we're not going to be able to plan all of those neighborhoods in the next year and a half. And so we're going to have to perform some kind of triage and figure out, which are the most likely to develop soonest, and how much attention can we put to those so that, as Vice Chair Chang was saying, the development doesn't happen ahead of the planning. So, I think this is a really important issue, but I think we just have to have a real strategy in this project goal and a reality about whether there's something for us to do in the next calendar year. And if so, let's identify it and let's say it's either staff driven or commission driven.
I agree. And I think there's two things I want to add. And one is that there are certain principles that may apply citywide that may come to mind mostly because of the changes to the South Palo Alto 101 area, whatever we're going to call that neighborhood. And I think that, so there's that. The other thing is, last year, Assistant Director Tanner wrote this because it was new and there was urgency to get it done on time. I invite all of my colleagues to take a crack at writing these things the way, if staff agrees, to potentially write some of these if you think there's a better way, or maybe staff wants to write it. I don't know. It wasn't very clear last year who was supposed to be doing this. But I think I think it's right that we didn't have the study session. That's true. But I think it's more important that going forward, we try to incorporate principles that will work all over the city and think about that new neighborhood, because it's really going to be bad if it just happens for people living there, if it just happens without this kind of planning. So would staff like help from the commission in writing these goals? Or do you see that as your?
Let's see. I think it's a collaborative effort that, we need to, we want this to reflect the commission's work plan. And I think it just needs to be balanced with, the understanding that the council assigns the work to staff and we've got more than a full boat of items to work on. So I think in particular, that's a good one for us to be thinking about collaboratively. How can we achieve the goals that you want to achieve? And that advances the project forward.
Commissioner Chang?
So it sounds like, so to respond to Commissioner Heckman's question about, is this something that is staff-led or commission-led? It sounds like, because this is 100% aligned with what council has asked, that this might be one where it actually makes sense for it to be staff-led. Do you agree?
I think the council recognized when they assigned this to us that we didn't have a lot of time to actually work on it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were clear that they weren't expecting anything this calendar year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they said, come back with a schedule of when we might be able to tackle these things. And so that's the assignment. And so to the extent that we're talking about something beyond that, I think we just need to understand what your interests are and I do think there's opportunities for study session discussion, looking at the code, looking at what's required for these caps. What would we want to study in these caps? I mean, I'll share with you that I spoke with the chair and the vice chair of the Architectural Review Board, and they have an interest in meeting at a joint session with the commission to talk about San Antonio in particular. And that might be, when I think about goals and actionable things that can be accomplished, that might be something where the commission and the ARB can start, brainstorming some ideas that might begin to form the basis of a scope of work that we might want to send out to somebody, through our RFP process. I mean, I would think the San Antonio one is going to be the first one that we're going to want to tackle. And I think that's going to probably come up pretty soon. When I say pretty soon, like within the next year, we're going to want to probably really start focusing in on that.
Yeah, so if your deadline, or if your assignment from council for the year is to get essentially a timeline, doesn't that then sort of imply that is council completely prescriptive and saying it needs to be a coordinated area plan? Or is there leeway in there to decide what type of plan it is that we can do and what time frame?
So I would like to think there's some leeway in there. I will say that our code only provides for a coordinated area plan. So we've got this, balancing act, and I want to check in with legal and understand, we're kind of doing something like this with the downtown housing plan. We're not calling it a coordinated area plan. And that one we're having a hard time just getting off the ground. Even getting a consultant on board to help us. So, I think there's ways that we can navigate it, and just would want to, that's an area where I think there's a great opportunity to engage the commission to say, okay, what are the parameters of this? And to my earlier comments, how is this going to be different than the cap? Like, what are we going to do differently? And what's a clear sort of, what's success? How do we get there? That's a kind of conversation that I think would be helpful as we start to think about doing more of these.
So it sounds like it's not specifically this goal as written here, but it sounds like there's two pieces that we might be able to commit to doing sometime this year. One is a study session with ARB, specifically thinking about the San Antonio area. But kind of bigger picture, and maybe the timing would be after the NVCAP is done, is sort of more of a postmortem / process discussion about how can we do a plan that's not necessarily a cap.
Yeah. So I agree. I think we should rewrite this goal. Yeah, that would be my suggestion. And really try to focus it from the standpoint of how can Palo Alto efficiently prepare a plan? And that plan will include obviously housing and transportation, multimodal access. We're going to want to consider, access to schools. We want to be mindful of, parks and amenities that we're going to want for, retail and services and so forth. But that's not really where I want to focus. That I'm more interested in the process, because the process is where we get sometimes bogged down. And how are we going to navigate through dissent or differing points of view expeditiously? That would be helpful to get that feedback from the commission and then be able to transmit that to the council and say, because I agree, we will never rise up to the standard of SOFA. It's not going to happen. And so not having to reach for that as a benchmark would be helpful.
Okay. Great. Commissioner Rector?
You mentioned downtown housing plan. Is that the same as the downtown plan? I know when we were looking at rail crossings, XCAP did not consider Palo Alto Avenue because they wanted to wait for the downtown plan. Is that plan different than the downtown housing plan, or?
I maybe. I do know that we, as planners, right, we were thinking big for this area. We're thinking university, we're thinking the transit center, and all of the uses that take place there. We're thinking of the ownership of the transit center and Stanford and connections to the Stanford shopping center, and the academic lands, and just our own sort of integration. That was a big project, and millions of dollars would be required to even prepare that plan. And we had applied for a grant. We did receive a grant from MTC for about $800,000, I think it was. But because $800,000 is far short of where we needed to be for that broader plan, we scaled something back to be really just about housing and housing opportunities downtown that would feed off of the housing element discussion that we've had. So that's what I'm calling the downtown housing plan, to be distinguished from something broader than what.
I'm a little worried that if we make it too broad, it's going to be forever. We won't get anything done. And I think rezoning downtown, I mean, there's a lot of low density areas that you could put a lot of housing downtown. And so maybe looking at that and looking at what are the hurdles, why wouldn't people put housing there, and addressing that is a more focused study that would be faster and have a better effect than having a grand plan that looks at rail crossings and everything.
Yeah, and maybe they happen, maybe they sync up at some point, but I agree with you. Being really focused in on the topic and borrow from our housing element, and even maybe go beyond in some areas if we feel like that would be appropriate. The reason I don't think we put more into the housing element is because we recognized that there was more. We didn't want to rely initially right out of the bat, for that area, but that is a prudent area for housing for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I think a lot of seniors would sell their house and move downtown. Maybe you're close to restaurants, Stanford Theater's there, shopping's. It could be a very good, vibrant place for someone who doesn't want a full single family house anymore.
Yeah. So, in some ways, maybe we're checking one of these plans off the list. If we can get this downtown housing plan rolling, maybe that could be a focus of that area. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to project goal number 4, which I think is written in a manner that we've already moved kind of beyond the study session. And we have various overlapping plans already being considered, that are already at the council level being considered by council for Cal Ave. So more up to date with what we've done so far for Cal Ave, and Cal Ave is certainly a priority for council. Any comments? Or
Yeah, I think I actually, I don't know. There's so much in this, and it's very high level and broadly written on some scale, that I actually don't know what it is we're to accomplish in this particular goal. And like you noted, Chair, I think there's elements of this that are scattered throughout other goals.
so maybe the best way to restate this, because Cal Ave has various things already being considered for it by council, is to kind of reflect that, and how, if we can still help with it, and just completely rewrite this, it's just, or edit this. We don't need a study session. We've moved beyond that for Cal Ave.
Yeah, I think Sylvia and I would support rewriting this so that there were some clear objectives that we were trying to achieve.
Thank you. Commissioner Templeton?
I just want to echo your comments. I think this needs to be simple, like support council's progress on California Avenue objectives, or something, like just be there to, like, that's going to be a lot of work. So the simplify and update, I love that.
Yep. Commissioner Che?
Well, yeah, I mean, because I think we're supposed to support council's efforts on everything. So another alternative would be to just, unless there's something specific that we know is going to come to us, it's potentially to just delete it. Given that the items didn't really come to us, they went straight to council. I'm not sure. So unless, Director Late, you know that there's something brewing in the next year that will come to us. I mean, I know that council wants an area plan for Cal Ave, but we're not going to be doing that in the next year. So I tend to say it's either just delete it or like Commissioner Templeton says, make it completely general.
Yeah, I think we. Yeah. Right. Yeah, but we agree. There's key elements of this goal that are referenced in here that are covered in other goals and work efforts. So we would support deleting it.
Okay, Commissioner Heckman?
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, what I notice is project goal 18 is Cal Ave and Ramona Street closures.
Yeah.
Right, which is really tied very strongly to what the purpose of 4 was as to Cal Ave. And the reality is, if we're closing Ramona, there's going to be a planning process for that too. And so I'm wondering if the vestiges of, if 4 can go away and the vestiges of that can be, carried into 18, which we'll talk about later, or at least, let's kind of put a pin in that until we get to 18. But I like the idea of getting rid of 4 and possibly if there's any content left that we want to retain, think about that for 18.
Commissioner Templeton?
So I agree with Vice Chair Chang that we are here to support everything council does that involves planning and transportation. So that leaves me with the question of why are we doing this plan at all? So how do you, in other words, how do you differentiate which things go in here and which things don't? So we have a couple of ways we could approach this. It could be that we only call out things that might be not prioritized on council's plan, but then again, why would we do that?
Yeah.
And so I think we leave ourselves a little ambiguity about what the point of this plan is.
I couldn't agree more. So if there's no other comments about 4, we can move on to 5.
And maybe just to comment on that, when you say the work plan in general, I think it's helpful just to know what's coming down over the next year. And in some ways, I don't think it was effective in this go around only because there's so much on here and there wasn't this, time to really thoughtfully get into it like you're doing this year. But aligning staff's work with commission input, I think helps keep us sort of on track. And then we can have this be something that is transmitted as your packet too, so that if you're also seeing that, hey, staff, what about this thing that is on our work plan here? When are you going to come back to us? That's a good way to sort of keep things, moving because we get bogged down in a lot of stuff. I hate to admit it, but, having that gentle sort of reminder might be a useful tool.
Okay, thanks for that. And
Chair? Chair?
oh, go ahead.
Just to follow up on that, like we meet 20 times a year. We have 18 goals, right? I'm not trying to say we shouldn't do it. I'm trying to say we need to understand why we're doing it and what the benefit is. And you just shared an important benefit. So I think we're starting to define the parameters of what we should be doing here. So I would say that 18 is definitely too many. We kind of knew that already, but just to explicitly say that if we're going to remind you, and we know we have some things that take many sessions.
Yep.
Like we should really concentrate on what goes on this list. I mean, I'm thinking like 10 or less, 10 or fewer.
Okay. Let's move on to goal number 5 then. Which is wireless. Would Director Late like to give us a little update?
Yeah, actually, I just messaged staff to see if I can get an update on this one. I actually, I'm I know there's work being done to refine the standards, but it's clearly not on a, it's not as far along as I would have hoped at this point. And I think part of that is just some of the vacancies that we have in our current planning program being diverted to other resources. So I'll try to get a next step update for you this evening on that. But otherwise, it's still something that I know that we're working on. There's some refinements that need to be made. I feel like we've come before the commission on this topic, and I think there's some guidance that we received about checking in with the wireless couriers was one piece, checking in with the neighbors and following. Oh, we checked in with the couriers. The direction was to follow up and check in with the neighbors. And we're trying to develop a system that makes these applications, processed in a reasonable time frame with awareness to the community and standards that we're going to be looking for. So it's, again, just kind of coming up with the objective standards. But I need to get a date for when we're going to come back.
Okay. Commissioner Chang?
Yeah, I know that there's just too much work for staff and all these vacancies. And that's why, and kind of to piggyback on your point about, you need that update. So my understanding, at least when we did the study session, was that the state, or I think it was a judge ruling, but basically that we're kind of not, because our ordinance isn't updated, because we don't have those objective standards, it's like a lost opportunity for the city to make things the way that we want it. But obviously housing element or cell phone towers. So the housing element obviously was something that was critical that we had to. Or is it something, we do need to keep our ordinances updated and create these objective standards. I think we're already 3 years, maybe 4, maybe now it's 4. I'm losing track of when it came for us for a study session. So then how, I don't want, to Commissioner Heckman's point, I don't want to put things on here if we're not going to do them. But then at the same time, if I take a giant step back, I'm thinking, well, if we should have done it 3 years ago, we can't keep kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
So I just, and I don't, this is not work that the commission can do. So we will need to review the ordinance, but it's not work that the commission can do. So that's why I'm kind of turning around to you and asking, what should we do with this one?
And I'm going to go to my colleagues in a second, but I will just make a comment that Director Late said the work plan was helpful for staff to remind them of things. So in that sense, I think we should keep this on here because there's a lot of interest and concern in the community. Yeah. Are you okay? Commissioner Templeton?
Thank you. I don't think that we need to drive this, and I don't believe that it would be us reminding staff for this one. So I agree with Vice Chair Chang that it doesn't come close in order of magnitude to the other things we've been talking about. So if we needed to cut one, I'm not saying don't do it. Obviously, it needs to be done, and that's something that your department will take care of. And we'll be here for you, but I'm not sure it is something we need to cluster in our work plan if we're winnowing it down.
Commissioner Heckman?
Yeah, thank you. So this is not a wish list. This is a to-do list, and it's a non-exclusive to-do list because really item number 1 is anything else that comes to us.
Yeah.
Right. Again, I looked through all of last year's agenda items. I'm going to say there were maybe 45 different agenda items we've had in the last year. And I just went, April to April kind of. 14 of them were on this list. So only a third of what we actually did shows up on this list. There were all kinds of, parcel maps, and there were ordinance changes, and, the regular business of the city is not on this list. This list is a to-do list. And and we didn't do anything about the wireless ordinance in the last year, from last April. So unless we know, again, I'm reviewing the agendas from last year, I couldn't find it. And I kind of remember that one. Well, I always remember when the wireless ordinance come with us because it always has a unique dynamic to it. But in any event, I don't think it came to us in this last calendar year. And unless we know that it's coming and we have something to do in the next fiscal year, then let's drop it from here. We don't have to say we're interested. This is not, these are things that we think are important. These are things that we know we have work to do in the next year on. And so I think it's really up to staff. If staff is, and it sounds like Director Late has to, check with staff on this, but we got a month before this comes back to us, I think. So if you find that this is coming back in the following calendar year, then let's keep it on, because it will be part of what we do. But if we're not certain of that, then it shouldn't be here. And if it comes to us anyway, that's okay.
Commissioner Rectal?
You mentioned this is a to-do list as opposed to a wish list, and I generally agree. I think we should shorten this up as much as we can. But you also talked earlier about, well, if it's something that we don't think we're going to be doing, we may want to put it in purgatory and put it at the back of the list and say, this is not on our to-do list, but it might be on our to-do list in 2 years. So this would be something I think you would probably want to move to purgatory and say, let's not forget about this.
Commissioner Chang?
I'm in agreement. If we really don't think we're going to get to it, we shouldn't have it on the list. So yes, put it in purgatory. But I do want to, because we're talking to staff here, and I know it's not totally in your control, like 4 years, if we really didn't address it, the last April to April cycle is too long to not update something when there's something where there's really significant community interest. I thought we did have a study session during the year, but I can't remember, the years kind of blur. So by taking it off, it's not staff don't do it. It's still urgent, but let's be realistic about just the constraints that you're facing.
Yep, understood. Thank you. And it is important. We understand that. And we know that there's community members who are really focused in on this and would certainly like to see us move forward on it. And so we are aware of that and want to do what we can to quickly move it forward. And there is work being done, but it's just balancing it with the other things that we have to do. I don't think the current ordinance is in any kind of, critical state. The ruling that I think you referenced didn't invalidate our ordinance. I think it enabled us to be more focused on some of our objective aesthetic standards than perhaps we are. So there's an opportunity to strengthen our ordinance, and I think that's the goal that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that thinking that the ruling might go the other way, we changed our ordinance and kind of like relaxed some elements of it. But we actually didn't need to. So that means we took things out that we didn't need to take out, and they're still not back.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's got the community so upset. Again, so not looking out for our own interests there.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's when we come back next month, we'll have more of an update for you on the wireless piece. And regardless of whether it stays on the list or goes to purgatory or elsewhere, it will be a priority that we'll be working on. It is something that's also on the council's list of things for us to do. So.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think we last talked about the wireless ordinance on January 12th, 2022, which I think was Vice Chair Chang's first meeting, perhaps. Or no, you joined in the fall. Right, right.
It
So
was
you,
my first meeting,
yeah,
back when I had long hair.
Can I have a copy of that book?
Oh,
Can you
the
make
days.
copies of that binder for all of us? Commissioner Templeton?
Thank you. So now that we're 5 in to our 18-unit long discussion, I wonder if we want to revisit the process any, because it feels like, I mean, I don't feel like any of us is droning on or anything, but it seems like it's taking a long time. Is there any optimizations that we could implement?
Yes, and thank you for the note.
You're
But I
welcome.
noticed that it was taking a long time. And I think we, as much as we all like to delve deep into these topics and discuss them with each other and staff, I think we have to move a little quicker. None of these items are agendized to discuss this evening. We're just trying to edit this list or potentially add to it. And so why don't we try to go a little faster, just
Maybe like a 1-minute shot clock?
because time to really discuss these is when these individual things come back to us as agenda items. Okay, where are we? Number 6. Is this already completed?
Number 6. Okay, no, I mean, well, okay, so this is a temporary, we've done that.
Yeah, I thought this was completed, so we can for sure delete this one.
Done. I mean,
Okay.
it's a temporary moratorium, so it's not done. It's just done for now.
So I don't think we need any comment on an item we just deleted. So let's move on to project goal 7.
It's one we merged with 2.
Yeah, so that's done. Merge with 2. Okay. Goal 8.
I can
We've-
just let you know we're working on that plan and I mentioned that we're coming back to you in the next couple months with some update.
Any comments from my colleagues? Commissioner Heckman?
yeah, just very briefly, because this one is reminding me, so I don't think we really have to do much to this, other than you notice in the timeline section of goal 8, return to PTC later in 2022. So I would like staff to go top to bottom, and because there are a number of updates or just, refinements. For example, up in the, preamble, the staff liaison has got Rachel's name for last year. So let's, update that. We have different commissioners, prior year accomplishments, and then flowing through this, I think we'll see some dates for 2022, 23 that need to be advanced. So that's more of just a clerical function that I wanted to make sure we catch.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Templeton?
Thank you. I think 3 of the 5 of us, at the very minimum, are pretty personally invested in this project. I'm wondering if you want to move it up higher in the rank, maybe.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the end of what you said.
Do we want to move it from number 8 to number 1 or 2? Or do we care about the order?
The list was not prioritized before. I
Okay.
mean, to my recollection, unless
Maybe
somebody
that's
recalls.
a process addition we can think about for next time this plan comes before us, since we're revisiting it next time.
Or maybe if we use letters instead of numbers, it wouldn't feel like this is an inadvertent prioritization.
That's a good idea. Okay, any other comments about 8? Then let's move on to 9.
Yeah, this one, I think we don't need to, you're living it.
Yeah. We got a study session coming up on May
May
8th, right?
No.
And then,
A public hearing.
public hearing, joint, I meant a joint session, not study session, public hearing. And then, next year, there will be work to do on this as we get certification and move forward with
This
other
year,
aspects.
there'll be loads to do. We're going to be doing that concurrently and it's not on this work plan, but if
Right.
we talk at the end about some things that might be coming down this year, I have a short list on that as well.
Yeah.
So to Commissioner Heckman's point, really, we just keep this in as a broad item, the housing element, and update,
Just kind of refresh what.
refresh the dates and whatnot.
Yep.
Any other comments? Just like, okay, we can move on to goal 10. I think this is done.
No, it's half done.
That's right.
We did the bones, but we got to come back and do the meat.
Okay, that's right. You're right.
And, you
You can
know,
go ahead.
will be, it's not these are administrative regulations too. So, you know, I don't know what we had communicated to the commission before about your engagement in that. I do know that we want to check in with the architecture review board because there's some design related components.
Right, so that's not necessarily something that would come to us, correct?
Yeah,
So our portion is done.
it could be. Yeah.
Well, I'm hesitant to agree with that because I'm pretty sure this, because we just dealt with this recently. And what we talked about was this is coming back, like we moved something out of the bones into the other part because it's coming back to us. So I don't want to wave it off in case it might. But staff can look at that. And if in fact, all that's left to do is the meat, which is purely an ARB to council, then we can take it off. But if there is something for us to do, then, you know, just keep it on and keep it here and update it.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Keep it there and update it. And any other comments? Okay. Number 11.
I do. I think staff would recommend combining all the parking items into a parking programs update. You
11, 12, 13,
And
and 17.
13.
And 17, I think. That's Cal Avenue parking. Can that be rolled in or you want to keep it
that
separate?
17 would have to come out of the planning department, not from transportation.
Ah, okay. That's a good reason to keep it separate.
But we are planning on bringing a parking programs update to you next quarter, fourth quarter of this fiscal year. So I don't know if you want to keep this item on, you can keep it on for the next program,
Just,
work plan if you'd like.
I think combining them and keeping it on here is appropriate. Any other comments? We're whipping through this now, Commissioner Templeton.
Yeah,
It's awesome. Thank you for making that adjustment.
Okay, on to goal 14. This is already done, there'll be changes to it at some point, but I don't know that we need to keep this on here.
I mean, it's, yeah, we were at 11, 12, 13. We will, Office of Transportation is planning on bringing to you at some point in late fiscal year 24, a service evaluation of the on-demand transit program. You can put it, you can keep it, or we'll bring it anyway. So I don't know that it needs to be listed as a to-do for you, but we would be bringing an evaluation of the first year of service.
but late fiscal year 24, is that not the next cycle, but the one after that? We're about to hit 23, 24. So when you say late 24, I don't know if that means,
Sorry, yeah, I mean a year from now.
okay. All right,
A little
so-
over a
so
year
it's
from now?
Coming to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
it's appropriate to keep it if we're
Okay.
expecting to bring it to us.
Okay.
On Sunday at the town hall, Philip mentioned that you're applying for more grants to extend the hours.
Yes.
And when would those come in? Is that soon or is that like down the road?
We're constantly applying, so I'm not sure. We did apply for a very large one. Hopefully we'll hear within the next 3 months, but I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think keep it and as refresh it, as Commissioner Heckman says, to reflect
Mhm.
where we're at. Okay, if there's no other comments, project goal 15, haven't we done ADUs like 7,000 times?
5.
So I exaggerated a little bit.
We'll probably be back next year with another state update to ADUs, but this one is done.
Can we take it off as a goal? Yes, please. Okay. All right, so we'll remove 15. Moving on to 16. Well, this would be for Ms. Starlack. But you are working on this year, as you've already stated. So I think we want to keep this one and just have you refresh it.
Yes, the scope of work, I believe, includes 3 meetings with PTC.
Okay. Comments? Commissioner Templeton?
Yes, I agree. We should keep it. If we were to be more specific here, I would love to work on understanding, I assume that this will be part of the presentation, understanding where deadly collisions have happened and seeing if there's anything we can do to improve it within some time frame.
Yeah, I want to clarify. So the bike plan will absolutely contain a crash analysis. And I mean, every bike plan does. So that will happen.
Yeah.
But I also just going back to the other item, the federal grant, that also will include a crash analysis for, I think, a robust program of work around traffic safety that I think you want. And
Be
so that's
awesome.
why I'm really excited about this federal grant. I just have to make it happen. But
Anything we can do to help, let us know.
It will lay out. Yeah, I need to get it going. So
Yeah.
thank you.
This is great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Rectal?
Yeah, there's been interest in a seal crossing to go under or over the railroad tracks around Seal Avenue. What's the status? Is that being worked at all? Do you see that in the future? Or is that still just kind of a pipe dream?
So that is, council asked us to include the consideration of that kind of as part of the grade separation considerations. Include that consideration into the bike plan update. So that will happen as part of a whole network analysis about where should crossings occur from a network connectivity perspective.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Goal 17.
So this is one that I'd recommend pulling off of the work plan. We've identified for the city council that this is not an item that we are going to pursue at this point. And not because we're being obstinate, but because of the reason this was put into place was to find an opportunity for more businesses, restaurants in particular, to be established on California Avenue, where right now, because of the parking standards, they're not able to take over a previous retail space because the parking standards are too great. AB 2097 effectively eliminates the need for this program because now a restaurant owner who would want to take over a retail space on California Avenue could do so without having to provide parking.
Oh, that's a good point, because this has been a concern of mine for years, 7 years now, because it was actually keeping businesses from moving in because of the prior parking restrictions. So that's great that we don't have to worry about that. It's a silver lining, perhaps. Okay,
What was that?
so
That was 2097.
AB 2097.
And can you give a quick summary?
Yeah, and I'll invite Albert Yang to join me if I don't quite get this right, but this is the one that I referenced earlier, where if you are for properties located within a half a mile of a Caltrain, rapid that's not the term. They don't say Caltrain in the state law, but that's the one that's locally appropriate for us. Within a half mile of that point, development projects for housing projects and for commercial projects, there's a 0 parking requirement. The state has stipulated, except for hotels and I think one other exemption.
but if they're not redeveloped,
If they get a building permit or for
so,
a tenant
okay, so
improvement.
even an occupancy permit would count?
Well, so if you're doing a restaurant, you're probably going to do you're going to need to put in stuff that's going to require a building permit. And that building permit process, as I understand it, qualifies as being subject to that provision. But let me ask Mr. Yang to join us. I see he's got his camera on.
It's kind of a nuance,
Yeah, I don't have much to add to what Director Late said. but on that specific issue, the state law says it applies to any development project. And it doesn't define what a development project is, but there are, at least this particular bill doesn't define what it means in this context. But there are a couple of definitions elsewhere in the government code that suggest that anytime you're getting a building permit, that's a development project.
Okay, thank you for that. So the real case we had where the copy shop had the lowest requirement because of the different parking structure on Cal Ave, and a yogurt store couldn't move in because takeout food has the highest. That won't happen anymore because of this.
There's no parking requirement within a half mile.
Okay, so a simple permit to occupy, because if they don't need a building permit, they would maybe still need to, I guess not. I mean, does a certificate, if all they need to move in and operate their legal use business is a certificate of occupancy, would it solve the problem?
Yeah, so Mr. Yang, I don't know if you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand the question. It's something we'd have to look more closely at. Have to pull up those definitions of development project again. But yeah, we can look into that. Practically, as Director Late said, most times, the only time we're running into this is when there's a change of use, right? That would otherwise have triggered a change in the parking requirement. And for the most part, if you're changing use, you're going to be doing enough tenant improvements that you'll be looking at a building permit.
Okay, thank you for that. Any comments from my colleagues? So we'll remove 17 and then we are down to 18, which, do we have any comments from Director Late?
For 18.
Or
The Office of Transportation is planning to bring this item to you. So if you want to keep it on the list, that would make sense.
okay, comments?
Let's keep it on the list.
Commissioner Chang?
No, I was just going to move on and just say, by my count, I think we've eliminated 7 or combined them with other things. So we're down to maybe 11 if my count is accurate.
I've got 10 and one moving to purgatory.
Oh, okay.
And so so far we've hit Commissioner Templeton's number, but I'm about to propose adding one. So
Yeah, so that
I might
was
incur her wrath.
right. That was my next question. Is there stuff that's not on here that we think should be? Right.
Mhm.
Commissioner Heckman?
Yeah, so the note that I made to myself, the thing that we had talked about, the same meeting we had the elections of officers, is we need to update our bylaws.
Yeah.
To address that issue. And so I think that should be on our work plan for this
Good
coming year.
idea. So let's add that as the new number 11 or 12, I guess. So update our bylaws to be consistent with a BCC handbook. And are there any other additions?
Yes, we're asking staff as well.
Okay.
Yes.
We each have a short list. Sylvia?
Oh, thank you. Thanks. And some of this can get put into a traffic safety item if you prefer. Staff would like to bring forward the Crescent Park traffic calming project that's been ongoing. And so that's an item. And the quiet zone, the Caltrain quiet zones might be something you want to include. Another is maybe rises to this level or not, but bicycle focused Muni code cleanup. There's a lot of arcane language in our Muni code.
Will you say that again?
Bicycle focused Muni code cleanup.
Why don't you add in the transportation issues that you think you need to, and then we can look at them, since they weren't agendized for tonight, we can look at them next time with our new colleagues.
Great.
Well, but if I can suggest, the bicycle focused muni code, which is 16 on the current list. I'm just thinking, can you just fold it into that? Or is it really a different thing?
They're worked on by different people.
Oh,
It's
okay.
kind of a different thing.
Okay.
I
And then-
see how you want to do it, but yeah.
Okay. And then the Crescent Park issue, number one, which is the traffic safety issue, which we're now broadening to just be more comprehensive. That one should be able to fit in there
Yeah.
as an example of the
Yeah.
kind of thing you'll bring us. I don't know if the Caltrain quiet zone really fits in there,
Okay.
because that's not so much a safety issue, is it? As a neighborhood,
Well, I
is it a
mean,
safety issue?
this, in the sense, I think, well, I should let Ms. Starlack answer, but in the sense that you have to beef up the safety significantly if you don't have the
Yeah,
horns.
so let's
Right.
fold that as another example in traffic safety,
Okay.
goal one.
Yeah, to the extent they can be folded in together, that it makes sense. I agree with that. Commissioner Templeton?
I was just going to say the same thing that you two both said, so I'm good.
Okay, other comments from
Okay.
staff or colleagues?
Got a couple more items, and I think this could probably go in the refreshed housing element bucket, but just so that you have some awareness, we will be coming back to you with some zoning changes to implement key components of the housing element that relate to, that we are relying on to achieve our RENA numbers. And so that's going to be upzoning some of the multifamily zones and the GM ROLM areas. There's going to be, we have these carryover sites where we need to allow for by right development if a developer provides 20% inclusionary. There are three, I believe, three or four Stanford owned properties that we had committed to making changes to our zoning to allow for greater housing development in those locations. So those are sort of RENA. Those we have to get done, and I believe we're targeting to have that done this year. And then another component, which we're going to try to fold into this process, but is not necessarily subject to the RENA component, is the housing incentive program. This is expanding. These are all programs that are in the housing element, and so those will be coming to you. So. Is that appropriate to fold that into a refreshed, housing element bucket?
Yeah, into goal 9, I guess you
Okay.
would put it there. Yeah, that would be very helpful.
Great. And then another one is renter protection. Let's see, the rental registry is something that we are actively working on. I mentioned the workshop on March 30th. There's going to be, I believe, a check-in with the commission on that, just so that you have some awareness. I don't know that there's trying to think. I don't believe there's a Title 18 implication, so there may not be any formal action of the commission, but we want to check in, since this body is obviously involved in housing related issues. We want to get your input on that program.
Okay, so that would be a new goal,
Yes.
because I don't think we have anything that pertains to that. Commissioner Heckman?
Well, if you're just coming to us for input and not a recommendation, I don't know that it needs to be a new goal. Again, I think it might be one of those things like, we're going to get a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
It's not
I
on our
know.
list. And
But-
that's important stuff to us, but it doesn't need to be on our list if we're not actually going to need to make a recommendation.
Okay.
That's my thought.
I don't have a strong position either way, because I don't feel like this list burdens us in any way, because we're going to get what we're going to get. But if people feel strongly about it, that's fine. Commissioner Templeton?
I feel strongly about it. I would like to see this on the list. I think we had a lively, I'm thinking it was a few years ago, but we had a really lively discussion about what the rental registry meant. And I think it means more than it seems like on the surface. It'd be really valuable. And other reasons. So I think I would love to prioritize that or add it as a special project goal. Thank you.
Okay. And let's see, just a couple other items. The council has asked us to add some regulations for developments related to bird safe glass in the city, as well as some regulations to address uplighting and sort of the Stark Skies initiative, so that we don't have to minimize light pollution from future development projects. So these are items that are currently not resourced, but we are wanting to get done, initiate this year, and would likely involve PTC engagement before the year is up, the fiscal year is up. So that's one that I would optimistically like to put on the plan.
And it was lighting, and what was the first part?
Bird safe glass.
Bird safe glass. I have a very strong preference to have this on our work list since both items were added by me to the comp plan. And so, and I don't feel this is a huge amount of work for staff because there are best practices established already in that can, so I don't think you have to start from zero.
Yeah, we'll probably get a consultant, and I know that we have a local.
I would really like to get that done.
Understood.
Comments, Commissioner Templeton?
Yeah, I think this is really important and something that Chair and I have often aligned on, and I feel like this is great progress. So why not showcase that it's something that we're working on and make sure that people can engage in the conversation. So thanks.
Great. Commissioner Chang and then Commissioner Heckman.
Did council by any chance ask staff to update the stream side or ordinance as well? Like, the 20 feet, 150 feet, which is also in our comp plan, but isn't in our legislation.
Yes. And it was the next one I was going to say.
Fantastic. Yay.
Again, optimistically, we are currently unresourced for it, but I want to see if there's some consultants that can help us to move that along. Okay.
Commissioner Heckman, you're.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with adding both of these things, which I think brings us, my count to 15 plus one in purgatory.
Is that the end of your list? Any other comments from colleagues? Then as long as you feel you got enough direction, I think we're done here. Oh,
Yeah, I just
Commissioner
have
Heckman.
a question. So and maybe I'm remembering our handbook, but we went through a process last year when Ed Lowen was our chair. And I thought it was the work plan, but maybe it was, I thought it was the work plan. I thought it was the annual work plan where the commission added this like set of priorities. Number one was, one of them was, process promptly the things that council sends to us. And there were 3 or 4 items on that. And I thought it was part of the work plan, but it's not here. And so I'm wondering if any of my fellow commissioners remember what I'm trying to remember and whether it's part of some other document we approved. Because if it's part of the work plan that we approved last year and somehow got cut off here, then we should know that. But if it's not ringing a bell, then maybe I just dreamt it.
Commissioner Rectal?
I wasn't talking.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't, Barta, you want to finish your?
Oh,
No, that's it. I'm just trying to remember if that's part of the work plan. Sorry, if it's part of the work plan that somehow got cut off, or was that some other document that we did? Maybe it was.
I think
part of
it's in our
handbook.
mission statement at the top of the work plan. Does that sound right to you?
Well, but I looked at that, but and maybe that's maybe that's how it ultimately played out. And again, I think once we went through this with our input, and so maybe that's what I was thinking of.
Maybe you and staff can look into it
Yeah.
offline
Yeah.
and when it comes back.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a different subject that I want to talk about. I don't want to make work for staff, but sometimes I feel, stop right there. Okay, so I'll shut up then. But sometimes I feel ignorant. Like a friend asked me about this incident that happened up on Middlefield. And I said, I don't know anything about it. She said, you're a transportation commissioner. You don't know anything about it. And so is there a way, and I think we talked about this earlier, is there a way for us to get reports that already made, and you don't have to present them, just send it to us once a month, talking about incidents, traffic incidents, particularly car, bicycle, car, pedestrian, or even bicycle, pedestrian, I guess. If there's such a thing that already exists, that would be very useful to keep us kind of in the loop of things.
So I'll defer that to Sylvia, just because I believe you know Phil Cami is the director for Office of Transportation, and it sounds like there might be some, if we work with our police department, maybe there's something that we can.
So
together?
this is police department get the data, and then they have the database, and then their staff does the reporting. So we can make a request for that, but they have been so understaffed that we have been unable to get the data from them.
Is there any way to automate this? Because I'm sure it's all on computer, right? So is there a script that they could run once a month and say, here you go, PTC, here's just a dump of all the data we have?
Yeah, I'll look into it.
It sounds simple, right?
It sounds simple. I mean, yeah.
Okay, but I don't want to make work for you, but it'd be very valuable if we could somehow get that. And so we have to balance those two things. The other thing is with the housing element, what's the production of housing? And I think once a month you make a report, or is it once a quarter, report to council?
Annually.
Oh, it's only, okay. But is it sometimes, I thought I saw sometimes you had like an update that I saw somewhere in the council. Maybe it's just annual, okay.
Yeah, just annually. And that's a state obligation, reporting requirement.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about your request? Are you looking for summary level data, or are you looking for the number of collisions only, or are you looking for collision, who was involved, where it happened, cause of collision, age of people involved?
Ideally, the latter, but
Yeah, that's the problem.
that's a problem.
So, okay, but I will ask PD and see what they can
See
provide to
what we can
PTC.
get.
Yeah,
I mean,
they do have a database with all the incidents.
yes.
So, and isn't it or is it not public?
This has come up so many times over the years that I've been on this commission, and it seems really easy, but there must be some reason that it's not, and it's a police department issue. So,
Yes, it's a police department issue.
so I don't know. I just thought I'd
If-
add that.
If
Are you-
this does appear to go a little bit beyond our agenda, but we've heard the request
Okay.
and let us circle back with you on what options might be available.
okay.
Okay.
And for the housing element, if it's just an annual update, it'd be good to send it to the planning commission too.
Oh, yeah. I thought it
Do we get it?
came to you. Do we not stop by the?
Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
think recently, it just, in fact, it's due to the state here pretty soon. I think in the next couple of days.
So
So,
we'll look for it in our mailbox.
yeah, we'll send you the draft. The council didn't change it, and so we can send that to you.
Okay.
Okay.
And
And
yeah.
do you keep a running total, or is it just once a year you go and add things up?
Oh, as far as net new housing production?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we do. We maintain a list. And this gives me an opportunity to sort of announce that we are working on a new housing information for tenants, or if you want information about development projects, housing projects, if you want information on ADUs, all the information that we're compiling is to be in one location. From housing services to production to, if you're an affordable housing provider, you can get information about all that stuff. I'll acknowledge that there's, this is an evolution, like new content will be added, but we've got the framework for it. And I hope to be able to publish information frequently on that website that deals with, that addresses, it has that chart, that RENA chart of what we're trying to do and how many units we've produced, so that people can just go to our website and check that out. That may not be available at the outset of its launch, which I think is happening in the next couple of weeks. But we will add that feature on so that people can have a sense for where we are and what's in the queue, pending, approved, under permit, things like that.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. Commissioner Templeton?
Thank you so much. Tagging along on Commissioner Rectal's questions, I think you were being really kind in saying that these are nice to haves. I don't think they're nice to haves. I think every time we have a planning commission meeting and we have a staff report, we should have one from transportation that includes collisions that they are aware of. Whether or not, police is cooperating or sending enough heads up information when collisions happen. That sounds like an internal process, but know that we support you and we will do what we can whenever it's agendized to help you get the support you need to get that data in a timely manner. I think the awareness of collisions is pretty minimal around here. We hear a few. There's many, many more. There's also many that go unreported, because the students are experiencing a collision but get up and walk away from it. So I want to encourage you to also consider whenever it's appropriate, and if it needs to be agendized, let us know. But the 311 app is in their hands. They could easily report and say, I experienced a collision here, with a map app, and they could drop a pin, and then you'd have more real-time data. You wouldn't be relying on a police incident, because some of these aren't even going to raise to the level of police incidents. But we know that if there's a frequency of collisions at a certain area, that eventually something might rise to that level, and we want to stay ahead of the game. So that data is really important. You've invested in this wonderful app of reporting things. We could do more with that if you want to. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do I have any other additions to this item from either staff or the commission? If not, we'll go ahead and, so staff, you have what you need, I think. Okay. So we will close this item and move on to our next items, which are approval of minutes. So we have approval of PTC draft summary minutes of February 8th, 2023. Do I have a motion and a seconder?
I'll move approval as revised.
Second.
Okay, could you please conduct the vote?
Commissioner Templeton,
Abstain.
Commissioner Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chang,
Yes.
Chair Suma,
Yes.
motion carries 401.
Okay. The next approval of Planning and Transportation Commission draft verbatim and summary minutes from February 22nd, 2023.
Move approval as revised.
Second.
We just need the vote then?
Chair Suma,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much. So now we're going to move on to commissioner questions, comments, announcements, or future meetings and agendas. And I would like to start that off by saying a few things. And one is to acknowledge that though she's not here, this is Commissioner Rupavar's last meeting with us after serving for 4 years. So I just want to really thank her. And if she's watching, I want to give her a round of applause and thank her for her service to the city and wish her well in whatever she's doing next. And I don't know if anybody else wanted to say anything about that. The other thing I wanted to let commissioners know, and the public might be interested, is that has to do with a code enforcement question earlier. The supervisor of code enforcement, Brian Reynolds, is having a community meeting, sort of to introduce the second full-time code enforcement officer that came on last year, and to have a meeting with the people. And also Robin Elner, who's his administrative support, will be there. Craig Hartley is the new officer who they hired. So sometime mid-April. So if you're interested in that issue, that's going to happen, and I'm sure it'll be on the city calendar, but I just wanted to alert you to that. And finally, I just wanted to thank our utilities department. It was very obvious during all these recent storms and power outages how fortunate we are to have a city with our own utilities and not get in line for PG, and also a really crack responsive team. Things got fixed really quickly. So they're probably not listening either, but a thanks to our utilities team. So Commissioner Heckman? Oh, okay. Ghost, okay. Anyone else? Okay. If there are no other comments, then I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.